The ballroom of Ashford House blazed with 1,000 candles, their light reflecting off gilt mirrors and crystal chandeliers until the entire assembly seemed suspended in amber. The season was at its height, and London's finest had gathered beneath the Marquess of Ashford's roof to observe, to judge and to whisper. Alexander Thornwood, 5th Duke of Greymont, stood near the terrace doors with a glass of champagne he had no intention of drinking, watching the dancers spin past in a blur of silk and satin. He was 32 years of age, possessed of a fortune that could purchase half of Mayfair, and blessed or cursed with the sort of classical features that made young ladies blush and their mothers sharpen their strategies. Dark hair swept back from a high forehead, grey eyes that held the chill of a winter morning, and a mouth that rarely curved into anything resembling genuine warmth. He had been called handsome. He had been called cold. He had been called many things, and he had ceased caring about any of them years ago. The Duke of Greymont did not dance. It was known. It was accepted. It was part of the legend that surrounded him like morning fog around his ancestral estate in Northumberland. He attended balls because duty required it, because his position demanded visibility, but he did not participate in the frivolities that consumed lesser men. He observed. He endured. He departed at the earliest moment propriety allowed. Tonight should have been no different. Greymont, you look as though you are attending a funeral rather than the finest ball of the season. Lord Pemberton appeared at his elbow, red-faced and jovial, already well into his cups. Come, man, surely even you can find some amusement in all this. Alexander inclined his head slightly, the gesture conveying politeness without warmth. I find the spectacle educational, Pemberton. Educational? Pemberton laughed, loud enough to draw glances. Good God, you are the only man in London who would describe the loveliest gathering of the year in such terms. Look around you, Greymont. Beauty, music, opportunity. Alexander did look. He saw what he always saw. A marketplace dressed in evening clothes, young ladies displayed like merchandise, mothers calculating settlements and bloodlines, men assessing fortunes and connections. It was the machinery of their world, and he understood it with perfect clarity. He had been part of it since birth, groomed for it, shaped by it, until he fit the mold so precisely that nothing of his true self remained visible to the casual observer, if indeed there was anything remaining at all. Miss Hartley has just arrived, Pemberton continued, following Alexander's gaze across the room. Beautiful creature, is she not? Quite the sensation this season. They say she refused Viscount Aldridge last week. Can you imagine? Refusing a Viscount. Alexander said nothing. He had noticed Miss Hartley's arrival, though he would not have admitted it, for any sum. She stood near the entrance to the ballroom speaking with Lady Ashford, and something about her drew the eye despite his determined indifference. She was not the most beautiful woman present. There were others with more classical features, more fashionable dress, but she possessed something else, something that disturbed the careful equilibrium he maintained. Life. That was what she possessed. An animation, a brightness that seemed to illuminate the space around her. When she laughed, and she was laughing now at something Lady Ashford had said, the sound carried across the noise of the ballroom like a bell. Clear, unaffected, genuine. It irritated him profoundly. I believe Lord Westbrook intends to make an offer, Pemberton was saying. Smart fellow, Westbrook. Knows a prize when he sees one. Though I must say, Greymont, you could do worse. The Hartley fortune may not match your own, but it is respectable, and the girl has breeding. Her mother was a Fairfax, you... No, I am not in the market for a wife, Pemberton. Alexander's voice carried the faintest edge, a warning that a more sober man would have heeded. Pemberton, however, was not a sober man. Every man is in the market for a wife, Greymont. You, most of all. You need an heir, do you not? The title must pass to someone, and unless you have plans I am unaware of, that will require a duchess. Alexander finished his champagne in one long swallow and set the glass on a passing servant's tray with more force than necessary. When I require marital advice, Pemberton, I shall be certain to consult you. Until that improbable moment, I would be grateful if you would direct your matchmaking impulses elsewhere. He walked away before Pemberton could respond, moving along the edge of the ballroom with the easy confidence of a man who had never been denied entry anywhere. Other guests stepped aside automatically, offering nods and curtsies that he returned with mechanical precision. He was halfway to the card room, where he could at least occupy himself with whist until a decent hour for departure, when he heard it. Her laugh again, closer now. Alexander stopped, cursing himself for the weakness, and turned his head slightly. Miss Hartley stood perhaps 10 feet away, surrounded by a small crowd of admirers. Lord Westbrook was among them naturally, along with the Honourable James Sinclair and young Viscount Denby. They clustered around her like moths around a flame, and she seemed entirely at ease with the attention, smiling at each in turn, her fan moving in graceful arcs that suggested both interest and discretion. She wore pale blue silk that seemed to shimmer in the candlelight, and her dark hair was dressed simply, without the excessive ornamentation favored by so many young ladies. A single strand of pearls at her throat, no other jewelry. The simplicity should have made her fade into the background, but instead it had the opposite effect. She stood out precisely because she did not try. "Miss Hartley," Westbrook was saying, his voice carrying clearly, "you must save me the supper dance. I shall expire from disappointment if you refuse." "Then I shall save it, Lord Westbrook," she replied, her voice warm with amusement. "I could not possibly be responsible for your expiration. Think of the scandal." The men around her laughed, charmed by her easy humor. Alexander found himself studying her face, noting the intelligence in her eyes, the way her smile reached them without artifice. She was not performing. That was what struck him. Every other woman in this room was playing a role, executing steps they had been taught since childhood, but Miss Hartley seemed to simply exist, naturally, unself-consciously. It was deeply unsettling. "And you, Miss Hartley," Sinclair interjected, clearly determined not to be outdone by Westbrook. "You promised me you would show me the conservatory. Lady Ashford's orchids are said to be extraordinary." "Did I promise that, Mr. Sinclair?" Miss Hartley's eyes danced with mischief. "How very forward of me. I must have been overcome by the heat." More laughter. Alexander realized he was staring and forced himself to look away, but not before she glanced in his direction. Their eyes met for perhaps half a second, no more, and he saw something flicker in her expression. Recognition, certainly. She knew who he was. Everyone knew who he was. But there was something else there, something he could not quite identify before she looked away again, her attention returning to her admirers. Dismissal. That was what he had seen. She had looked at him and found him unworthy of sustained attention. The realization struck him like a physical blow, and he hated himself for caring. He was the Duke of Greymont. He did not require the approval or attention of some country miss making her first season in London, no matter how unusual she might be. He had been courted, pursued, and schemed after by women far more beautiful, far more accomplished, far more everything. He did not care about Miss Hartley's dances. He did not. "Your Grace." Lady Ashford appeared at his side, materializing with the uncanny timing hostesses seemed to cultivate. "How delightful to see you. I had feared you might not attend this evening." "Lady Ashford," Alexander bowed with impeccable correctness. "Your ball is, as always, perfection itself. You are too kind." She smiled, but her eyes were sharp, assessing. "I wonder if I might impose upon you, Your Grace. Miss Hartley, you see her there, with Lord Westbrook and the others. She expressed a particular wish to be introduced to you. She is quite accomplished, you know. Her father was a great admirer of your late father." Alexander felt his jaw tighten. So, Miss Hartley had requested an introduction. That changed the equation somewhat, though not in a way that pleased him. She was like all the others after all then, angling for position, calculating advantage. "I am certain Miss Hartley has sufficient admirers without my addition to their number," he said coolly. Lady Ashford's smile never wavered. "Nevertheless, Your Grace, I have promised. Would you deny me the pleasure of fulfilling my word?" It was neatly done. To refuse now would be churlish, and whatever Alexander was, he was not churlish. He inclined his head in acquiescence and followed Lady Ashford across the ballroom, aware of the eyes tracking their progress, the whispers that began to spread, like ripples on water. The Duke of Greymont approaching a young lady, unprecedented. "Miss Hartley," Lady Ashford said warmly. "May I present His Grace, the Duke of Greymont? Your Grace, Miss Eleanor Hartley." Eleanor Hartley turned toward him, and Alexander found himself the subject of direct scrutiny. Her eyes were brown, not the fashionable light brown, but a deep, warm shade that reminded him of autumn leaves. She studied him for a moment with an openness that bordered on impropriety, then sank into a curtsy that was perfectly correct, but somehow lacked the deference he usually received. "Your Grace," she said, "I am honored." The words were right. The tone was not. There was something in it, amusement, challenge, that set his teeth on edge. "Miss Hartley." He bowed, conscious of the watching crowd, of Westbrook's suddenly stiff expression, of the way the entire group seemed to hold its breath. "Lady Ashford tells me your father knew mine." "He did, Your Grace. They served together briefly in Parliament before my father retired to Derbyshire. He spoke of the late Duke often, with great respect." "That is gratifying to hear." An awkward silence fell. Alexander was aware that he should say something else, should make conversation, but he found himself at a loss. He was not accustomed to this, to speaking with young ladies who looked at him as though he was simply a man rather than a title, a fortune, a prize to be won. "Miss Hartley was just telling us about her." "Time in Bath," Westbrook interjected, clearly attempting to reclaim her attention. "Most amusing stories." "Bath is indeed amusing," Alexander heard himself say, and immediately regretted it. The comment was inane beneath him. He sounded like a fool. Eleanor's lips twitched almost imperceptibly. "It can be, Your Grace, though I suspect you do not often seek amusement." The observation was delivered mildly, but it landed with precision. Several of the gentlemen shifted uncomfortably. Lady Ashford's fan snapped open. Alexander felt heat rise in his chest. Anger, he told himself, though it felt uncomfortably like embarrassment. "I seek what is appropriate, Miss Hartley. I leave amusement to those with time to spare." "How very fortunate for them." She smiled, but there was steel beneath the sweetness. "And how very unfortunate for you." Good God. Had she just pitied him? In front of half the ton? Alexander drew himself up to his full height, every inch the Duke. "I assure you, Miss Hartley, I am perfectly content with my choices." "I am certain you are, Your Grace." She turned slightly, her attention already shifting away from him. "Lord Westbrook, I believe they are forming sets for the next dance. You did wish to partner me, did you not?" "Indeed, Miss Hartley." Westbrook practically glowed with triumph as he offered his arm. She took it, smiled at the assembled company, and allowed Westbrook to lead her toward the dance floor. She did not look back at Alexander. Not once. He stood there aware of the curious glances, the speculation that would fuel tomorrow's gossip, and felt something unfamiliar twist in his chest. He told himself it was irritation. She was impertinent, rude, entirely unsuitable despite her breeding. But as he watched her take her place in the set, watched her laugh at something Westbrook said, watched her move through the dance with effortless grace, he recognized the lie. She had dismissed him, and some part of him, a part he had thought long dead, wanted very badly to know why. Alexander left Ashford House at midnight, earlier than he had originally intended, but later than prudence dictated. His carriage waited on the street, his crest emblazoned on the door in gold that caught the street lamp's light. He climbed inside without speaking to his driver, pulled the curtains closed, and sat in darkness as the vehicle lurched into motion. She had dismissed him. The thought circled his mind like a bird of prey, refusing to settle, refusing to depart. He leaned his head back against the cushioned seat and closed his eyes, but that only made it worse. Behind his closed lids, he saw her face, that moment of assessment when she had looked at him and found him. What? Wanting? Boring? Unworthy of her time? It should not matter. He was the Duke of Greymont. His consequence was unassailable. His position in society required no validation from some country girl with too much confidence and too little sense of her own place in the hierarchy they all inhabited. And yet, the carriage rolled through London streets, passing other vehicles carrying other guests from other balls, all of them part of the same endless dance. Alexander had been part of it for so long that he sometimes forgot there had been a time when things were different. When he had been different. Thomas. The name came unbidden, as it sometimes did in these dark hours. His brother. His younger brother by 3 years. Blessed with everything. Alexander lacked warmth, humor, the ability to connect with people as though it were the most natural thing in the world. Thomas, who should never have inherited anything, who had been free to live as he pleased without the weight of expectation crushing him into a shape that fit the ducal mold. Thomas, who had been dead for 14 years. Alexander opened his eyes and stared at nothing. He did not often allow himself to think of Thomas. The memories were too sharp, too painful, and pain was a luxury he could not afford. Dukes did not grieve publicly. Dukes did not break down. Dukes maintained composure regardless of what tragedies befell them. But here, in the darkness of his carriage with no witnesses, he could admit certain truths. He had loved his brother. More than that, he had envied him. Envied Thomas's easy laugh, his ability to make friends wherever he went, his romance with Miss Catherine Ashford, no relation to tonight's hostess, that had been the talk of London for an entire season. Thomas had been 18, Catherine 17, and they had been absurdly, obviously painfully in love in a way that made even the most cynical observers smile. Alexander had been 21, newly returned from Oxford, already being groomed to take over certain estate matters from their father. He had attended the same parties, moved through the same rooms, and watched his brother shine while he himself remained in the shadows. The heir and the spare, the duty and the privilege. He had not resented Thomas. That was the thing he wanted to remember clearly. He had been genuinely happy for his brother's happiness, had even liked Catherine once he got past the instinctive distrust of anyone who might join their family. She had been kind to him, had tried to draw him into conversation, had treated him as though he were not simply the intimidating future duke, but a person worthy of friendship. And then Thomas had died. The fever had come swiftly, viciously, without warning. 1 week, Thomas had been planning his wedding to Catherine, laughing about the honeymoon journey they would take to Italy. The next week he had been fighting for breath in a darkened sick room, while physicians shook their heads and murmured about humors and vapors and all the useless theories that could not save him. Alexander had sat with him. He had held his brother's hand and listened to him ramble in delirium, heard him call for Catherine, who had not been allowed in the sick room, propriety, maintained even in crisis. Heard him whisper apologies and declarations, and finally, at the end, nothing at all. Thomas died 3 days before his 19th birthday. Catherine, it was said, did not speak for a month afterwards. She eventually married Lord Hartwick and moved to Scotland. Alexander had never seen her again. And Alexander had become the heir in truth, rather than merely in title. All his father's attention, all his mother's expectations, all the weight of the dukedom, settled onto his shoulders like an iron mantle. There was no one else now, no spare, just him, and the overwhelming responsibility of ensuring that the Greymont line continued, that the estates prospered, that the family name remained beyond reproach. He had locked away his grief. That was what one did. He had attended the funeral with appropriate solemnity, accepted condolences with appropriate gratitude, and then he had returned to work. There was always work. The estates, the investments, the parliamentary duties, the endless cycle of obligations that came with his position. He had learned not to feel. It was simpler that way. Feelings were dangerous, unpredictable, liable to interfere with judgment. Far better to approach everything with cool rationality, to make decisions based on logic rather than emotion, to maintain control at all times. It had worked. For 14 years, it had worked perfectly, until tonight. The carriage stopped. Alexander realized they had reached his London residence, a magnificent townhouse in Grosvenor Square that he had inherited along with everything else. Servants appeared to open the door, to lower the step, to attend to his every need with the silent efficiency that was the mark of a well-run household. He climbed out, nodded to his butler, and went directly to his study without calling for refreshment or company. The room was exactly as he had left it that morning. Desk clear, papers organized, everything in its proper place. Order, control, predictability. He poured himself a brandy and stood by the window, looking out at the square below. A few other townhouses still showed lights. The season's gatherings would continue for hours yet. Young ladies dancing with young gentlemen, mothers plotting, fathers negotiating. The great machine of society grinding on, and somewhere out there, Miss Eleanor Hartley was probably still dancing, still laughing, still being entirely too pleased with herself. How very unfortunate for you. Her words echoed in his memory. She had pitied him. The realization still stung, perhaps more than it should. What did she see when she looked at him? A cold man, a joyless man, a man so caught up in duty and position that he had forgotten how to live. She was not entirely wrong. Alexander drained his brandy and set the glass down with a sharp click. This was absurd. He was allowing one impertinent girl to disturb his peace, to make him question choices he had made years ago and never regretted. Miss Hartley was nobody. Nothing. A momentary irritation that would fade as soon as he put her out of his mind. He would not think of her again. He went to bed determined to forget the entire evening. But sleep came slowly, and when it finally arrived, it brought dreams he had not experienced in years. Thomas laughing, Catherine crying, and through it all, a girl in pale blue silk who looked at him with brown eyes that saw too much. The next day began as every day began, with routine. Alexander woke at 6, dressed with his valet's assistance, breakfasted alone while reading the morning papers. There was news from the continent, speculation about corn prices, reports from various committees. He read it all with careful attention, making mental notes of matters that would require his attention in Parliament. At 9 o'clock, his secretary arrived with correspondence, letters from his steward in Northumberland, requests for donations to various charities, invitations to dinners and balls, and house parties that would occupy the remainder of the season. Alexander worked through them systematically, dictating responses, making decisions, maintaining the vast machinery of his life. He did not think about Miss Hartley. At 11 o'clock, he received an unexpected visitor. "The Marquis of Ashford, Your Grace," his butler announced. Alexander looked up from the contract he had been reviewing, surprised. Ashford was an acquaintance rather than a friend. They moved in the same circles, but had little in common beyond their titles. For him to call so early was unusual. "Show him in." Ashford entered a moment later, dressed for riding, his face flushed from the morning air. He was perhaps 40, still handsome in a fading way, known for his excellent taste in wine and his mediocre taste in investments. "Graymont," he said, accepting the chair Alexander indicated. "I hope I am not intruding." "Not at all. To what do I owe the pleasure?" Ashford settled himself, suddenly looking uncomfortable. "I wanted to speak with you about last night, about Miss Hartley." Alexander felt his expression freeze. "Indeed?" "Yes. You see," Ashford paused, choosing his words carefully. "My wife, she is quite taken with the girl, believes she would make an excellent match for someone of consequence, and after your introduction last night, well, there has been considerable speculation." "Speculation?" Alexander kept his voice carefully neutral. "That you might have an interest in Miss Hartley." Ashford rushed the words slightly, clearly eager to have them out. "And I wanted to inform you as a courtesy that Lord Westbrook intends to make an offer. Very soon. Perhaps today." Something cold and sharp twisted in Alexander's chest. "Does he?" "He does. And I thought, that is, my wife thought you should know. In case..." Ashford trailed off, clearly uncertain how to finish. "In case I wished to prevent it?" Alexander supplied, his voice like ice. "Well, yes. If you had an interest." Alexander stood, moving to the window, his back to Ashford. Outside, London continued its morning routine. Carriages rolling past, servants hurrying on errands, the world spinning on without concern for the strange tightness in his chest. "I have no interest in Miss Hartley," he said clearly. "Lord Westbrook is welcome to make whatever offer he pleases. I wish them both every happiness." The lie tasted like ash. "Ah," Ashford sounded relieved. "Well then, I am glad we cleared that up. Westbrook will be pleased to hear it. Decent fellow Westbrook, she could do worse." "Indeed." Ashford departed shortly after, leaving Alexander alone with the silence and his thoughts. He returned to his desk, picked up the contract he had been reviewing, and stared at it without seeing a single word. Lord Westbrook intends to make an offer. She would accept, of course. Westbrook was personable, wealthy enough, from a good family. He would give her a comfortable life, children, a position in society. Everything a sensible young woman could want. Everything Miss Hartley deserved. Alexander set down the contract and closed his eyes. This was good news. It meant he could forget about her entirely, could return to his carefully ordered life without the distraction of brown eyes and impertinent comments. She would marry Westbrook, leave London after the season, and Alexander would never have to think about her again. But when he opened his eyes, he was reaching for paper and pen. He did not know what he was doing. He knew only that the thought of Miss Hartley dancing with Westbrook, laughing with Westbrook, accepting Westbrook's ring and his name and his future, made something in him howl in protest. He wrote a single line: "Would you honor me with a dance at the Pemberton Ball tomorrow evening?" Then he signed it, sealed it, and called for a footman before he could change his mind. "Deliver this to Miss Eleanor Hartley," he said, handing over the note. "Wait for a reply." The footman departed. Alexander sat in his study and waited, his heart beating with a rhythm he had not felt in 14 years. Anticipation, fear, hope. The footman returned within the hour. He carried a note, folded once, unsealed. Alexander opened it with hands that wanted to tremble but did not. Inside, in elegant script, Miss Hartley had written, "Your Grace, I am flattered by your invitation, but I fear I must decline. The dances at Lord Pemberton's ball have all been claimed. Perhaps another time, E.H." He read it twice, 3 times. The words did not change. She had refused him. The Duke of Greymont. She had refused him. Alexander stood very still, staring at the note, feeling something crack inside him. It was a small crack, barely noticeable, but it was there. In the armor he had spent 14 years building, Miss Eleanor Hartley had found a weakness. And against all reason, against all sense, he wanted her to strike again. The Pemberton Ball was even more crowded than Lady Ashford's had been. Lord Pemberton, flush with recent gambling wins and determined to demonstrate his newly expanded fortune, had spared no expense. The ballroom glittered with decorations imported from Paris. An orchestra of unusual size occupied one end of the room, and the refreshments included delicacies that most guests had likely never encountered before. Alexander attended because refusal would have been noted, commented upon, analyzed until society extracted meaning from his absence that might or might not exist. Better to appear, make his bow, and depart at a reasonable hour. He would not remain long. He had work waiting at home. Always work, always obligations, always something to occupy his mind and his time. He certainly was not here because Miss Hartley would be in attendance. He had told himself this repeatedly over the past 30 hours, since receiving her note of refusal. He had not thought about her since then, or rather, he had thought about her only in passing, the way one might notice a persistent rain or an unexpected chill in the air. Nothing significant, nothing that required attention. The fact that he had changed his attire 3 times before settling on his evening clothes meant nothing. The fact that he had arrived nearly on time rather than fashionably late was simply coincidence. The fact that his eyes swept the ballroom the moment he entered, searching for pale blue silk and dark hair, was merely awareness. A duke must be aware of his surroundings. He found her almost immediately. She stood near the orchestra, surrounded by the same cluster of admirers from Ashford House, plus several new additions. Lord Westbrook remained at her elbow, proprietary in a way that made Alexander's jaw tighten. She wore ivory tonight rather than blue, and the color made her skin glow in the candlelight. Diamonds at her throat and ears, borrowed from her mother, most likely, as the Hartley fortune was respectable but not extravagant. She was laughing at something Lord Denby had said. Her face turned toward the young Viscount with apparent delight. Westbrook looked annoyed. Sinclair looked envious. The entire group orbited around her like planets around the sun. Alexander remained near the entrance, partially concealed by a column, and watched. He told himself he would observe for a moment only, satisfy his curiosity, and then move on to other areas of the room. He had acquaintances to greet, business to discuss. Miss Hartley was nothing to him, Her dances were not his concern. "Greymont!" Lord Pemberton materialized beside him, already red-faced despite the early hour. "Splendid to see you, Splendid. You will stay for supper, I hope. I have secured the most extraordinary duck from France. Cost me a fortune, but worth every penny. I am certain it will be excellent, Pemberton." Alexander did not look away from Miss Hartley. "And the company. Look around you, Greymont. The finest of the ton, all gathered under my roof. Makes a man proud, it does." Pemberton followed Alexander's gaze and grinned. "Ah, I see you have spotted our little seasoned darling, Miss Hartley. Quite something, is she not? She appears to be enjoying herself." "That she is, that she is. Westbrook is mad for her, you know, absolutely besotted. Means to offer for her any day now. Would have done it already if his mother was not insisting he wait until they can arrange a proper settlement. But it is as good as done. Everyone says so." Alexander said nothing. His champagne glass was empty. He had not noticed drinking it. "Of course," Pemberton continued, oblivious to Alexander's silence, "there are those who say she has set her cap higher than Westbrook, that she is holding out for a duke." He laughed, clapping Alexander on the shoulder with too much force. "Not you, though, eh? Everyone knows you are not in the market." "No," Alexander heard himself say. "Not me." Pemberton wandered off to harass other guests, and Alexander remained by his column, watching as the orchestra began a new piece. Westbrook immediately claimed Miss Hartley's hand, leading her onto the floor with barely concealed triumph. She went willingly, smiling up at him as they took their positions. Alexander watched them dance. He watched the way Westbrook held her, the way she responded to his conversation, the way she seemed entirely comfortable in his company. They were well matched, he supposed. Similar ages, similar backgrounds, similar positions in society. Westbrook would make her a perfectly adequate husband. The thought made him want to break something. "Your Grace," a soft voice at his elbow. He turned to find Lady Pemberton, their hostess, smiling at him with the calculating expression of a woman who sensed opportunity. "How delightful that you could attend. I wonder if I might impose upon you for a favor." Alexander inclined his head warily. "Lady Pemberton, my niece, Miss Charlotte Pemberton, has just arrived in London. It is her first season and she is quite overwhelmed by it all. I was hoping you might consent to dance with her just once. It would mean so much to the poor girl. Give her confidence, you understand." "I do not dance, Lady Pemberton. It is known." "Oh, but surely you could make an exception, just this once? For a young lady in need of encouragement?" Lady Pemberton's smile never wavered. "Miss Charlotte is just there, in the pink. Do you see her?" Alexander looked. Miss Charlotte. Pemberton was 17, perhaps 18, dressed in unfortunate pink that clashed with her complexion. She stood against the wall with several other young ladies, all of them clearly relegated to the margins of the evening's activities. Wallflowers, in the cruel parlance of the ton. "Lady Pemberton, please, Your Grace, it would be such a kindness." He wanted to refuse. He should refuse. He did not dance, had not danced in years, not since before Thomas died, not since he had learned that allowing oneself to feel anything, even the simple pleasure of music and movement, was dangerous. But Miss Charlotte looked so miserable, and Lady Pemberton was waiting, and the alternative was to continue standing here, watching Miss Hartley dance with Westbrook, which was not why he had come, which did not matter to him at all. "Very well," he heard himself say. "One dance." Lady Pemberton's face lit with genuine pleasure. "Oh, Your Grace, you are too kind." "Charlotte, Charlotte, my dear, come. Here at once." Miss Charlotte approached with obvious trepidation, her eyes wide as she curtsied. Your Grace, Miss Pemberton." He bowed correctly, offered his hand. "Would you honor me with this dance?" She nearly fainted. Alexander was certain of it. He felt her hand tremble in his as he led her onto the floor, felt her entire body shake with nerves as they took their positions. The Duke of Greymont was dancing. The whispers spread through the ballroom like wildfire. The music began. It was a country dance, nothing too complicated, but Miss Charlotte stumbled through every step despite the simplicity. She apologized constantly, her face growing redder with each mistake, clearly convinced she was ruining what should have been the triumph of her young life. "Breathe, Miss Pemberton," Alexander said quietly. "You are doing perfectly well. I am not, Your Grace. I am dreadful." Everyone is watching. Then give them something worth watching. Head up, shoulders back. You are dancing. With a duke. Act as though you deserve to. She blinked at him, startled by the firmness in his tone, then slowly straightened. Her next steps were more confident. By the end of the dance, she was almost smiling. "Thank you, Your Grace," she whispered as he returned her to her aunt. "I shall never forget this. You are most welcome, Miss Pemberton." Lady Pemberton was effusive in her gratitude, but Alexander barely heard her. His attention had been caught by someone else. Miss Hartley stood at the edge of the dance floor, no longer with Westbrook, watching him with an expression he could not quite read. Their eyes met across the room. She did not look away. Neither did he. For a long moment, they simply stared at each other, and Alexander felt something shift in his chest. Recognition, perhaps, understanding, an acknowledgement that something had changed, though neither of them could have said what. Then Miss Hartley smiled, not the bright, easy smile she had given her admirers, but something smaller, more private, and inclined her head slightly before turning away. Alexander stood very still, his heart beating too fast, wondering what had just happened. "Your Grace," a new voice interrupted. He turned to find Lord Westbrook approaching, his expression stiff with barely concealed hostility. "Might I have a word?" "Of course." Alexander moved away from the dance floor to a quieter corner. Westbrook followed, his hands clenched at his sides. "I wanted to inform you," Westbrook said without preamble, "that I intend to propose to Miss Hartley. Tonight, if possible. I have secured her father's permission and her mother's blessing. I am telling you this as a courtesy, so there will be no misunderstanding." "Why would there be a misunderstanding?" Alexander kept his voice cool despite the anger rising in his throat. "Because you asked her to dance. You sent her a note." "So, she had told Westbrook about his invitation. Interesting." "I did," Alexander acknowledged. "Miss Hartley declined. She indicated all her dances were claimed." "They were. They are. By me and others who have genuine interest in her company." Westbrook's face flushed darker. "Not by men who simply wish to amuse themselves at a lady's expense." "I beg your pardon?" "Everyone knows you do not care about marriage, Greymont. You have made that abundantly clear for years. So why the sudden interest in Miss Hartley? Is it because she refused you? Is this some game to you?" Alexander felt his control slip, felt 14 years of carefully maintained composure threaten to crack. "You forget yourself, Westbrook." "Do I? I think not. I think I am the first person to say what everyone else is thinking. You have no intention of marrying Miss Hartley or anyone else. You simply want what you cannot have, and I will not stand by and watch you toy with her affections for your own amusement. My intentions toward Miss Hartley are none of your concern. They are when they interfere with mine." Westbrook stepped closer, his voice dropping to a harsh whisper. "She is too kind to tell you directly, but I will. Stay away from her, Greymont. She deserves better than a cold man who cares for nothing but his title and his fortune." The words struck with precision, finding the wound that Miss Hartley had opened and driving deeper. A cold man, a joyless man, someone who had forgotten how to live. "If Miss Hartley wishes me to stay away," Alexander said, his voice like winter frost, "She's welcome to tell me herself. Until then, I will conduct myself as I see fit. Then you leave me no choice." "No choice about what?" "I will propose tonight, now, and she will accept, because unlike you, I can offer her something real, something genuine, not just an empty title and a frozen heart." Westbrook turned and walked away before Alexander could respond. He pushed through the crowd, heading directly toward Miss Hartley, who stood with Mrs. Sinclair and Lady Ashford. Alexander watched, unable to move as Westbrook bowed before her, spoke quietly and offered his arm. Miss Hartley looked up, surprised. She glanced past Westbrook. Did her eyes find Alexander's? He could not be certain, and then she smiled and took Westbrook's arm. They left the ballroom together, moving toward the terrace doors. He was going to propose. Right now. In the garden or conservatory, or wherever young couples went to exchange vows of eternal devotion, and she would accept. Why would she not? Westbrook was everything Alexander was not. Warm, attentive, capable of genuine emotion. Westbrook could give her happiness. Alexander could offer only duty, position, and the hollow echo of a life lived in service to expectations that had killed every spark of joy he had ever possessed. He should be relieved. This solved everything. She would marry Westbrook, and Alexander could return to his carefully ordered existence without the distraction of brown eyes that saw too much. But as he stood in Lord Pemberton's ballroom, surrounded by music and laughter and the machinery of society, Alexander felt something he had not felt in 14 years. Loss. Not the sudden, violent loss of Thomas's death. This was slower, quieter, but no less devastating. It was the loss of something he had not even known he wanted until it was being taken away. The loss of possibility, of change, of the chance to be something other than what he had become. "Your Grace?" A servant appeared at his elbow. "You requested. Your carriage at midnight. It is waiting." Alexander looked at the clock. Midnight already. Hours had passed in what felt like moments. He nodded, accepted his hat and gloves, and moved toward the entrance. He would leave. He would go home. He would forget this entire evening. But as he reached the door, he looked back one final time. The terrace doors remained closed. Miss Hartley and Lord Westbrook had not returned. It was done then. Alexander climbed into his carriage and pulled the curtains. Closed against the London night. He sat in darkness and did not allow himself to feel anything at all. But alone, with no witnesses, he pressed his hand against his chest, where something ached with an intensity that shocked him. His heart, still beating, still capable of pain, still, somehow, alive. Morning arrived with characteristic London greyness, the sky a uniform sheet of clouds that promised rain without quite delivering it. Alexander woke early, despite having barely slept. His mind, refusing to quiet even when exhaustion should have claimed him. He dressed, descended to breakfast, and discovered that his usual morning routine held no appeal whatsoever. The newspapers sat untouched beside his plate. His coffee grew cold while he stared at nothing. His secretary arrived at 9 o'clock with correspondence and found the Duke of Greymont still sitting at the breakfast table, motionless, his expression unreadable. "Your Grace? Are you quite well?" "Perfectly." Alexander forced himself to focus. "What requires my attention?" "Several matters, Your Grace. First, Lord Pemberton has written to express his gratitude for your attendance last evening. He mentions specifically your kindness to Miss Charlotte Pemberton." "Acknowledged." Next, an invitation from the Duchess of Marlborough for her house party next month. She requests an early response. "Decline." His secretary paused, pen hovering. "Your Grace, the Duchess will be disappointed. You have not attended any house parties this season." "I have not attended house parties for several seasons. The Duchess will survive." Next, a letter from your steward in Northumberland. He reports that the repairs to the East Wing are proceeding well, but will require additional funds. Authorize them. And finally, his secretary hesitated. "There is mention in the morning papers of Lord Westbrook's betrothal." Alexander's hand tightened on his coffee cup. "Indeed? To Miss Eleanor Hartley. Apparently the proposal was made last evening at the Pemberton ball. The announcement will appear in tomorrow's papers, but society already knows. It is the talk of London this morning. How delightful for them." The words came out harder than intended. "Your Grace, that will be all. I have business to attend to." His secretary departed, leaving Alexander alone with the newspapers he had no wish to read, and the knowledge that had turned his sleepless night into something worse than mere insomnia. She had accepted. Miss Eleanor Hartley would become Lady Westbrook, would leave London for Westbrook's estate in Hampshire, would disappear from Alexander's life as completely as if she had never entered it. This was what he wanted. This was the correct outcome. She would be happy with Westbrook, and Alexander would be free to return to his previous existence without complication. He repeated these thoughts like an incantation throughout the morning, through his meeting with his man of business, through the stack of correspondence that required his signature, through the appearance of Lord Pemberton himself, who arrived unannounced at 11 o'clock with a bottle of exceptional whiskey and an air of celebration. "Greymont, have you heard the news? Westbrook has done it. Proposed to Miss Hartley and been accepted. Splendid match, absolutely splendid. The girl has done well for herself." Alexander received this information with appropriate interest. How fortunate for both parties. Indeed, and Wanted to thank you personally for your contribution to the evening. Dancing with young Charlotte. You cannot imagine what it meant to her. She has been floating on air since last night, talking of nothing else. My sister-in-law is beside herself with gratitude. I was pleased to assist. Pemberton settled himself without invitation, clearly prepared for a longer visit than Alexander desired. Between us, Graymont, I was not certain Miss Hartley would accept Westbrook. The girl is difficult to read, you know. Turns down Aldridge without blinking, keeps half the young bucks in London dancing attendance on her, and then accepts Westbrook just like that. He snapped his fingers. Makes a man wonder what goes through a woman's mind. I could not possibly speculate. No, of course not. But there were some who thought, well, no matter. It is settled now. Westbrook is over the moon, the families are pleased, and Miss Hartley will make a charming Lady Westbrook. All's well that ends. Well, eh? Alexander made appropriate noises of agreement and eventually succeeded in ushering Pemberton toward the door. But before departing, Pemberton turned back with an odd expression. I say, Graymont, did you really mean what you said last night? I said many things last night. To what do you refer? About your intentions toward Miss Hartley being none of Westbrook's concern. Several people overheard your conversation, and there has been some speculation. There is always speculation, Pemberton. I pay it no mind. Of course, still I wondered, that is, my wife wondered, whether you might have, but no, clearly not. You are not the type for grand passions, are you? Too sensible for that. Too sensible, too cold, too dead inside to feel anything resembling passion. Quite right, Pemberton. I am entirely too sensible. After Pemberton left, Alexander retreated to his study and poured himself whiskey despite the early hour. He stood at the window, glass in hand, and stared at Grosvenor Square without seeing it. He should be working. He had obligations, responsibilities, matters that required his attention. The dukedom did not run itself. But for the first time in 14 years, Alexander found he did not care about any of it. What was the point? He went through the motions, maintained the machinery, preserved the legacy. But for what? For whom? He had no heir, no family, no one who would mourn him beyond the appropriate period society dictated. When he died, the title would pass to some distant cousin he had never met, and the great Graymont legacy would continue with someone else at the helm. It meant nothing. He meant nothing. He was simply a caretaker, maintaining property and position until death released him from the duty. Your Grace, his butler appeared in the doorway. Miss Hartley has called. She asks if you will receive her. The whiskey glass slipped from Alexander's hand. It struck the floor, but did not break, rolling in a lazy circle while amber liquid spread across the Aubusson carpet. Miss Hartley, he repeated stupidly. Yes, Your Grace. She is waiting in the drawing room. Shall I tell her you are not at home? No. Yes. Send her away. He could not see her. Not now. Not when he had finally accepted that she was lost to him, that Westbrook had won and he had lost, and it was better this way. I will receive her, he heard himself say. His butler's eyebrow rose a fraction. The closest that excellent. Servant would ever come to expressing surprise, but he merely nodded and withdrew. Alexander stood frozen for a long moment, staring at the spilled whiskey, his heart beating too fast. Why was she here? To inform him personally of her engagement? To gloat over his reaction at the ball? To what? He straightened his cravat, checked his appearance in the mirror by the door, and descended to the drawing room with the same feeling a man might have approaching his own execution. She stood by the window when he entered, looking out at the square, her back to him. She wore a walking dress of deep green, her hair dressed simply beneath a modest bonnet. No jewelry, except for a single pearl brooch at her throat. She looked different, smaller somehow, less certain. Miss Hartley. His voice came out rougher than intended. She turned quickly, and he saw that her face was pale, her eyes shadowed as though she too had not slept. Your Grace, thank you for receiving me. I know I should not have come without proper introduction or chaperone, but I needed to speak with you. Congratulations on your betrothal. The words were automatic, correct, and they landed between them like stones. Eleanor flinched slightly. Thank you. That is part of why I am here. Oh? He remained near the door, not trusting himself to come closer. I wanted to explain. About last night. About Lord Westbrook's proposal. There is nothing to explain. You accepted an offer of marriage from a worthy gentleman. It is the natural order of things. Is it? Her voice held an edge he had not heard before. Is it natural to accept a proposal from one man while thinking of another? The room seemed to tilt. Alexander gripped the doorframe. Miss Hartley, I need to know something, Your Grace. She moved toward him, her hands clasped tightly before her. When you sent me that note, asking me to dance, were you simply being polite? Was it obligation? Or did you mean it? He should lie. He should say it was nothing. A moment's whim, entirely meaningless. He should send her away before he said something catastrophically stupid. I meant it, he said instead. Her breath caught. Why? Why? Yes, why? You have spent years making it abundantly clear that you have no interest in dancing, in socializing, in anything that might suggest you are human rather than a title with legs. So why ask me? Why ask at all if you meant to continue treating me with indifference? The accusation stung, because it was true. He had asked her to dance and then spent the entire evening watching her with other men, making no effort to approach her again, acting as though his invitation had been meaningless. I did not treat you with indifference. Did you not? You stood across the ballroom like a statue, observing but not participating, present but not engaged. You watched me dance with Lord Westbrook and said nothing. You let him escort me to the terrace and said nothing. You wanted me to object. The words burst out before he could stop them. You wanted me to stride over like some hero from a novel and declare my intentions before God and society. I wanted you to do something, anything, to show that you cared at all whether I existed. I danced, he was shouting now, 14 years of control shattering like glass. For the first time in 14 years I danced. Not with you because you had refused me, but I danced. And do you know why I danced, Miss Hartley? Because watching you with Westbrook was intolerable. Because the thought of you accepting his proposal made me want to destroy something. Because you have somehow managed to wake up parts of me I thought were dead, and I hate you for it. The silence that followed was deafening. Eleanor stared at him, her face white, her eyes wide with shock. Alexander stared back, horrified by what he had just revealed, unable to take it back. You hate me, she said finally, her voice very small. No. He closed his eyes, fighting for composure. No, I do not hate you. I hate what you have done to me. I hate that you have made me feel things I swore I would never feel again. I hate that I cannot look at you without wanting things I have no right to want. I hate that you are engaged to Westbrook and I have only myself to blame for it. You have yourself to blame. Of course, if I had been braver, bolder, less of a coward, I would have asked you to dance at the Ashford ball instead of standing there like a fool. I would have claimed every dance on your card instead of sending a pathetic note a day too late. I would have told Westbrook to go to hell when he warned me off. But I did none of those things because I am exactly what everyone says I am. Cold, cautious, controlled to the point of paralysis. You are not cold. Eleanor's voice was steady now, certain. A cold man would not have danced with Miss Charlotte Pemberton. A cold man would not have spent an entire evening trying not to watch me. A cold man would not be standing here now, telling me things that clearly cost him everything to say. It does not matter what I am, Miss Hartley. You are engaged to Westbrook. I know. Then why are you here? Why come to torment me with what cannot be? She looked at him for a long moment, and he saw tears gather in her eyes. Because I needed to know if I had imagined it. The connection between us. The sense that there was something there. Something real and important. Even though we had barely spoken. I needed to know if I was mad or if you felt it too. And now you know. Yes, now I know. She brushed at her eyes with trembling fingers. And now everything is so much worse. Because I have to marry Lord Westbrook, knowing that somewhere in London is a duke who makes my heart race with a single glance, who occupies my thoughts when he should not, who might have been... Do not say it. Alexander's voice broke. Please, Miss Hartley. Eleanor, do not say it. Because I cannot bear it. The use of her Christian name hung between them, intimate and forbidden. She took a step toward him, then another, until they stood close enough that he could see the gold flecks in her brown eyes, could smell the lavender scent of her hair. I should not have accepted him, she whispered. I should have refused, should have waited, but I thought you did not care. I thought I was simply another young lady trying to catch the attention of the uncatchable Duke of Greymont. And when Lord Westbrook proposed, he was so earnest, so sincere, and I was so angry at you for making me feel things and then acting as though I did not exist. So you said yes to hurt me. I said yes because I thought it was the sensible choice, because Lord Westbrook offered me everything a woman should want and you offered me nothing. Not a word, not a glance, nothing. She was right. He had offered her nothing. He had been too proud, too afraid, too convinced that feeling anything was dangerous. And now she was engaged to another man, and there was nothing he could do about it. You should go, he said hoarsely. This is improper. You are engaged. If anyone knew you were here, let them know. Let all of London know. I do not care. You should care. Your reputation. My reputation is the least of my concerns right now. She reached out, her hand hovering near his chest, but not quite touching. Tell me something, Your Grace. If I were not engaged, if I had refused Lord Westbrook, what would you do? The question hung in the air between them. Alexander looked at her hand so close to his heart and felt the careful walls he had built around himself crumbling. I would court you, he said quietly. Properly. Publicly. I would call on you every day, send you flowers, take you driving in Hyde Park where everyone could see. I would dance with you at every ball, and I would not care who watched or what they said. I would make certain that every person in London knew that you were mine and I was yours. But I am engaged. Yes. To a good man who has done nothing to deserve betrayal. Yes. So we can have none of those things. No, we cannot. Eleanor's hand dropped. She stepped back, and the distance between them felt like miles. Then I should go. I should return to Lord Westbrook and be the fiancé he deserves. I should forget this conversation ever happened. Yes, Alexander agreed, though the word felt like poison. You should. She turned toward the door, and Alexander knew that if he let her walk away now, it would be over. She would marry Westbrook, and Alexander would spend the rest of his life wondering what might have been if he had been brave enough to fight for her. But he was the Duke of Greymont. He did not fight for things. He accepted what duty demanded and maintained control regardless of what it cost him. Eleanor reached the door. Her hand touched the handle. Wait, Alexander said. She froze, but did not turn around. I cannot ask you to break your engagement. It would ruin you, and I will not be responsible for that. But before you go, before you marry him, I need you to know something. What? Her voice was barely audible. For 14 years I have been dead inside, since my brother died, since I became the heir, since I learned that feeling anything was a weakness I could not afford. I have gone through every day existing but not living, performing my duties but taking no joy in anything. I thought that was simply who I was now, who I would always be. He crossed the room to stand behind her, close enough that he could see her shoulders shaking. And then I met you, he continued softly, and you looked at me as though I was a man rather than a title. You challenged me, dismissed me, refused to be impressed by wealth or position, and something in me, something I thought was long dead, woke up. You made me feel again, Eleanor. You made me want to feel. And even though I cannot have you, even though you will marry Westbrook and I will return to my grey existence, I needed you to know that. I needed you to know that you changed me. A sob escaped her. She whirled around, and her face was wet with tears. That is the cruelest thing you could possibly say to me. I know. How can I marry him now? How can I spend the rest of my life with Lord Westbrook, knowing that somewhere in London is a man who sees me, truly sees me, who feels what I feel? Because you are stronger than I am. Because you will honor your commitment even though it breaks your heart. Because that is who you are. Someone who keeps her word even when it costs her everything. I hate you, she whispered. I know. She crossed the distance between them in 3 steps and pressed her hand against his chest right over his heart. He could feel it beating too fast, could feel the warmth of her palm through his waistcoat. It is beating, she said wonderingly. Your heart. It is beating. Because of you. They stood like that for a long moment, her hand on his heart, his hands clenched at his sides to keep from reaching for her. The moment stretched, suspended, perfect and terrible. Then Eleanor pulled away. She straightened her bonnet, smoothed her skirts, and became once again the proper young lady that society expected her to be. "Goodbye, Your Grace," she said formally. "Goodbye, Miss Hartley." She left without looking back. Alexander remained in the drawing room long after the sound of her. Footsteps faded, staring at the place where she had stood, feeling his heart beat in a chest that no longer felt empty. He had told her the truth. She had changed him, and now he had to live with that change, knowing he had destroyed his own chance at happiness through pride and fear, and the stubborn conviction that feeling anything was dangerous. Perhaps it was. Perhaps she would marry Westbrook and forget him, and in time the ache in his chest would fade to a manageable regret. But somehow, Alexander doubted it. 3 weeks passed, 21 days during which Alexander discovered that heartbreak was not, as literature suggested, a sudden and dramatic affair, but rather a slow erosion of everything that made existence bearable. He woke each morning to grey London skies that seemed to mirror the emptiness inside him. He went through his routines with mechanical precision, dressing, breakfasting, attending to correspondence, meeting with his steward and man of business. But it was all performance, a carefully maintained facade that concealed the hollowness beneath. He did not attend any balls or parties. He declined every invitation, pleading pressure of business, and society eventually stopped asking. The Duke of Greymont had returned to his customary isolation, and no one was surprised. This was, after all, who he had always been: remote, unapproachable, more statue than man. But alone in his study at night, with brandy he barely tasted and books he could not read, Alexander allowed himself to remember. Her face, her voice, the way she had looked at him in his drawing room, tears streaming down her cheeks, her hand pressed over his beating heart. How can I spend the rest of my life with Lord Westbrook, knowing that somewhere in London is a man who sees me? The question haunted him, because the answer was simple. She could not. Or rather, she could. She would, because she had given her word. But it would destroy something vital in her. That brightness, that animation, that quality that had drawn him to her in the first place would dim and eventually extinguish, crushed beneath the weight of duty and denial. He knew this because it had happened to him. For 14 years he had denied himself feeling, had locked away grief and joy and everything in between, until he had become exactly what everyone believed him to be: cold, controlled, incapable of genuine emotion. Eleanor would become the same. Lady Westbrook, wife and eventually mother, performing her role with grace while something inside her slowly died, and he would have to watch it happen, would encounter her at balls and dinners over the years, would see the light fade from her eyes, and would know he could have prevented it if he had been brave enough to act. "Your Grace," his butler's voice interrupted his thoughts. "Lord Pemberton has called. He says it is urgent." Alexander looked up from his desk, where correspondence lay untouched. At this hour? It was nearly 11 in the evening. "He insisted, Your Grace. He appears quite agitated." "Very well, show him in." Pemberton entered a moment later, his face flushed, his clothes disheveled as though he had dressed in haste. "Greymont, thank God you are home. I need your help." Alexander stood, immediately alert. "What has happened?" "It is about Miss Hartley, Eleanor. I do not know where else to turn." The name struck like a physical blow. Alexander came around his desk, his heart suddenly racing. "What about Miss Hartley? Is she hurt?" "Not hurt precisely, but—" Pemberton ran a hand through his hair. "The wedding is tomorrow, you know. Tomorrow afternoon at St. George's. But tonight there was a dinner, families gathering before the ceremony, and Miss Hartley, she collapsed. Simply fainted dead away in the middle of the drawing room." "Collapsed?" Alexander's hands were shaking. He pressed them flat against his desk. "Has a physician been called?" Of course. He examined her, said there was nothing physically wrong. "Nerves," he suggested. "Bridal nerves, perfectly common, but Greymont—" Pemberton lowered his voice. "I do not think it was nerves. I think the girl is heartbroken." "Heartbroken?" "Yes. And I know you said you had no interest in her, that your intentions were nothing, but my wife, she has eyes in her head. She saw how Miss Hartley looked when your name was mentioned. She saw how you looked at the Pemberton ball, and she thinks, that is, we both think, that perhaps you were not being entirely truthful about your feelings." Alexander said nothing. He could not speak past the tightness in his throat. "The wedding is tomorrow," Pemberton continued urgently. "Tomorrow afternoon. And if you have any regard for Miss Hartley at all, any feeling whatsoever, you need to act now before it is too late. She is engaged to Westbrook. The banns have been read. The contracts are signed. There is nothing I can do." "There is everything you can do. You are the Duke of Greymont. You could go to her now tonight and tell her how you feel. You could give her a choice, a real choice, before she binds herself to a man she does not love. She gave her word to Westbrook, and she will keep it unless someone gives her a reason not to." Pemberton grabbed Alexander's arm, his grip surprisingly strong. "Listen to me, Greymont. I am not a romantic man. I married my wife for her dowry and her connections, and if we have found some measure of contentment together, it is more than most couples achieve. But Miss Hartley deserves better than contentment. She deserves joy, passion, love, and whether you wish to admit it or not, you could give her those things. You do not know that. I know that I saw her face when she looked at you. I know that I saw you dance for the first time in anyone's memory. I know that two people who should be happy about an upcoming wedding are both miserable instead. And I know that if you let her marry Westbrook tomorrow without at least trying to stop it, you will regret it for the rest of your life." Alexander pulled away, moving to the window, staring out at the darkness. Pemberton was right. God help him. Pemberton was absolutely right. If he did nothing, if he let tomorrow arrive and Eleanor marry Westbrook, while he sat in his study nursing his regrets, he would never forgive himself. But he had no right to interfere. She had made her choice. She had accepted Westbrook's proposal, had allowed the banns to be read, had participated in all the preparations. To object now would be selfish in the extreme. It would potentially ruin her reputation, would certainly humiliate Westbrook, would cause a scandal that would follow them all for years. "I cannot," he said finally. "I will not destroy her future for my own desires." "Her future is already destroyed." Pemberton's voice rose with frustration. "Can you not see that? She is about to marry a man she does not love, because the man she does love was too proud or too scared or too bloody noble to fight for her." The words hung in the air. Alexander gripped the window frame, his knuckles white. "What do you want me to do, Pemberton? Storm the church tomorrow? Object during the ceremony like some character from a penny novel? I want you to go to her tonight before the wedding. Give her the choice you should have given her weeks ago. And if she chooses Westbrook anyway, if she tells me she would rather honor her commitment than break it for a man who waited until the last possible moment to speak, then at least you will know you tried. At least you will have been brave enough to risk rejection rather than simply accepting defeat." Pemberton moved to stand beside him. "I know what people say about you, Greymont. Cold, unfeeling, incapable of genuine emotion, and I believed it myself until recently. But I think I was wrong. I think you feel everything, perhaps too much, and that is why you have locked it all away. Because if you allow yourself to feel, you might have to admit that you are as vulnerable and human as the rest of us." Alexander closed his eyes. "My brother died. I know. He was in love. He was engaged. He was planning his wedding, planning his life. And then he died. In a matter of days, everything he had hoped for was gone. And I watched him die, Pemberton. I sat beside his bed and watched him call for Catherine, watched him beg for more time, watched him realize that all his dreams were ending before they had even begun. And I swore then that I would never allow myself to care that much about anything, because caring that much means you have something to lose, and loss is part of living," Pemberton said quietly. "Your brother lost his life, yes. But before that he had Catherine. He had love, he had joy. Would you deny him that? Would you say he should never have loved her because loving her made his death more painful? No, of course not. Then why deny yourself? Why punish yourself for being alive when he is not?" The question struck at the heart of everything. Why indeed? Because he had survived and Thomas had not. Because it seemed wrong to embrace life when his brother had been denied it. Because allowing himself to love Eleanor felt like a betrayal of the grief he had carried for 14 years. "Go to her," Pemberton urged. "Tonight, before morning arrives and it is truly too late." Alexander turned from the window. He looked at Pemberton. Jovial, sometimes. Foolish Pemberton, who had somehow become the voice of reason and courage, and made a decision. Where is she? Pemberton grinned. The Hartley residence. Brook Street. The families are all staying there tonight before the wedding. Security is tight, of course. Westbrook has insisted on propriety, not wanting any scandal before the ceremony. But if anyone could gain entrance, I am the Duke of Greymont. Precisely. Alexander called for his carriage. He called for his cloak. He did not change his clothes or arrange his appearance or do any of the things a man planning to interrupt an engagement should probably do. He simply went, driven by something he could no longer deny or control or lock away. Fear, hope, desperation, love. The words settled in his chest as the carriage rolled through London's dark streets. He loved her. He had loved her from the moment she dismissed him at the Ashford ball, from the moment she looked at him and saw not a duke, but a man who had forgotten how to live. He loved her intelligence, her spirit, her refusal to be impressed by titles or wealth or position. He loved that she had woken him from 14 years of sleep, had made him feel again, despite every defense he had erected against feeling. And tomorrow she would marry someone else unless he found the courage to stop it. The Hartley residence blazed with lights when they arrived. Clearly, the pre-wedding celebrations were still in progress. Alexander's carriage stopped at the entrance and he climbed out without waiting for his driver to lower the steps. The front door was opened by a servant who recognized him immediately. "Your Grace, we were not expecting—" "I must speak with Miss Hartley, immediately." "I am afraid that is not possible, Your Grace. Miss Hartley has retired for the evening. The wedding is tomorrow and I am aware of when the wedding is." Alexander used his full ducal authority, the voice that brooked no argument. "I will speak with Miss Hartley now." "Fetch her." "Your Grace, I really cannot—" "What is this commotion?" A new voice. Alexander looked up to see an older woman descending the stairs, clearly Eleanor's mother. She had the same brown eyes, the same determined chin. "Your Grace? What are you doing here?" "Mrs. Hartley, I apologize for the intrusion, but I must speak with your daughter." "At this hour? The day before her wedding? Absolutely not. It would be most improper." "I understand your concern, madam, but—" "No." Mrs. Hartley's voice. It was firm. "I do not know what has brought you here, Your Grace, but Eleanor is marrying Lord Westbrook tomorrow. The arrangements are made, the guests invited, the church prepared. Whatever you wish to say to her can wait." "It cannot wait." "It must." They stared at each other, locked in a battle of wills. Alexander could force the issue. He was a duke, he could insist, could push past servants and propriety to reach Eleanor, but doing so would only make things worse. If he was to give Eleanor a real choice, it had to be freely made, not coerced through scandal or confrontation. "Please," he said, the word costing him everything. "Please, Mrs. Hartley, I know I have no right to ask this. I know I should not be here. But I love your daughter, and I hope that she loves me. And if there is even the smallest chance that tomorrow's wedding is a mistake, do you not owe it to her to let her hear what I have to say?" Mrs. Hartley's expression softened slightly. "You love her?" "Yes." "Since when?" "Since the moment I met her. I was simply too blind and too afraid to acknowledge it." Mrs. Hartley was silent for a long moment. Then she sighed. "Eleanor is in the garden. She could not sleep, said she needed air. But Your Grace, if you hurt her, if you play with her affections and then walk away again, I will ensure that every door in London is closed to you, duke or no duke." "I understand, thank you." He found her in the garden behind the house, sitting on a stone bench, beneath a willow tree. The moon provided just enough light to see her face, pale and strained, her eyes red as though she had been crying. She wore a simple white dressing gown, with a shawl wrapped around her shoulders, her hair loose down her back. She looked up as he approached, and her eyes widened with shock. "Alexander?" The use of his Christian name sent warmth through him. "Eleanor, what are you doing here? How did you—" "Your mother allowed it, after I begged." "You begged?" A ghost of— A smile touched her lips. "The Duke of Greymont begged? I would beg the entire world if it meant being allowed to speak with you." He moved closer, then stopped, maintaining proper distance, even though every instinct screamed at him to close the gap. "I heard you collapsed tonight. Foolish nerves, I am perfectly well." "Are you?" She looked away. "What do you want, Alexander? It is late. The wedding is tomorrow. We said our goodbyes." "No, we did not." We said things should end, that we could not be together, that you had to honor your commitment to Westbrook, but we did not say goodbye. And I have realized something over these past 3 weeks. What? That some things are worth fighting for. That love, real love, the kind that wakes you up and terrifies you and makes you feel alive for the first time in years, is worth any risk, any scandal, any consequence. He took a breath. I love you, Eleanor. I should have said it weeks ago. I should have fought for you instead of accepting defeat. But I am saying it now on the eve of your wedding when it is almost too late. I love you, and I am asking you not to marry Westbrook tomorrow. The silence that followed was absolute. Eleanor stared at him, her face unreadable in the moonlight. You are asking me to break my engagement, she said finally. Yes. To humiliate Lord Westbrook in front of all society. Yes. To risk my reputation, my family's good name, for a man who has spent weeks pushing me away. Yes. Alexander moved closer, dropping to one knee before her like a supplicant before a queen. I am asking all of that, and I know I have no right. I know I have done nothing to deserve your consideration. But Eleanor, if you marry him tomorrow while feeling what I believe you feel for me, it will destroy you. It will destroy us both, and I will not allow that to happen without at least trying to prevent it. Tears slipped down her cheeks. What if I say no? What if I tell you I am going to marry Lord Westbrook because I gave him my word, because he deserves my loyalty, because you waited too long? Then I will accept it. I will leave here tonight and never speak of this again. I will attend your wedding if you wish, or stay away if you do not. I will do whatever you ask of me always. Even if it breaks your heart? My heart is already broken, Eleanor. It broke the moment you walked out of my drawing room. The only question now is whether it will heal or remain shattered forever. She reached out, her fingers touching his face with heartbreaking gentleness. You should have come sooner. I know. You should have fought for me weeks ago. I know. You should have danced with me at the Ashford ball, should have claimed every dance, should have made it impossible for Lord Westbrook to even approach me. I know, and I will regret it until my dying day. But Eleanor, I am here now. I am on my knees before you, begging you to choose me. Choose us. Choose the possibility of something real and true and frightening, rather than the safety of a marriage that will make you miserable. She was crying openly now, her whole body shaking. I cannot. The words gutted him. Alexander closed his eyes, feeling the last ember of hope extinguish. I cannot marry him, Eleanor continued, her voice breaking. I have known it for weeks. I knew it the moment I left your house, the moment I touched your heart and felt it beating. I cannot marry Lord Westbrook because I love you, Alexander. I love you desperately, impossibly, and I have been trying to convince myself that duty was enough, that honor was enough, but it is not. Nothing is enough except you. Alexander's eyes snapped open. Eleanor, but I am afraid. She cupped his face in her hands, forcing him to look at her. I am so afraid. Afraid you will hurt me. Afraid you will retreat into that cold shell again. Afraid that loving you will cost me everything and leave me with nothing. Then we will be afraid together, he said fiercely, because I am terrified too. Terrified of feeling this much, terrified of needing you so completely, terrified that I will fail you, or disappoint you, or prove unworthy of the gift you are offering. But Eleanor, I would rather live in fear with you than in safety without you. I would rather risk everything for one moment of real joy than spend the rest of my life regretting what might have been. She kissed him then. Sudden, fierce, desperate, her hands tangled, in his hair, pulling him closer, and Alexander wrapped his arms around her, lifting her from the bench, holding her as though she might disappear if he loosened his grip even slightly. The kiss was nothing like the chaste touching of lips that propriety demanded. It was raw and passionate, and filled with weeks of denial and longing. It was a promise and a claiming and a declaration of war against everything that had kept them apart. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Eleanor whispered against his lips, "What do we do now?" Now? Alexander smiled, and it felt strange on his face, as though his muscles had forgotten the movement. Now we go inside and inform your mother that there will be no wedding tomorrow. Now we face Westbrook together and offer him the apology he deserves. Now we endure the scandal and the gossip and whatever consequences come from choosing each other over propriety. And then I court you properly. Then I prove to you and to everyone else that the Duke of Greymont is capable of love. Then I marry you in that same church at that same time, with those same guests, and I spend the rest of my life ensuring you never regret choosing me." Eleanor laughed through her tears. "You have it all planned. I have had 3 weeks to think about nothing else." She kissed him again, softer this time but no less meaningful. "I love you, Alexander Thornwood. And I love you, Eleanor Hartley. Soon to be Eleanor Thornwood. Soon to be a Duchess. Soon to be my Duchess. The only one that matters." They walked back to the house hand in hand, ready to face whatever morning would bring. Ready to endure scandal and speculation and social censure. Ready to fight for each other, for their future, for the chance to be more than what society expected them to be. The Duke, who never cared about her dances, had died inside when she said those words at the Ashford ball. But he had been reborn tonight, in a garden beneath a willow tree, through the courage of a woman who loved him enough to risk everything. And this time he would not retreat. This time he would not hide. This time he would live. The morning arrived grey and cold, London wrapped in the kind of mist that seemed to muffle sound and slow time itself. Alexander had not returned to his own residence. After their reunion in the garden, after Eleanor's mother had been summoned and informed, with varying degrees of shock and disapproval, of the change in plans, it had been decided that Alexander would remain until morning to face Lord Westbrook together with Eleanor. He had spent what remained of the night in the Hartley drawing room, alone with his thoughts and a pot of cooling tea that no one remembered to refresh. Sleep was impossible. He sat by the window watching the sky gradually lighten, thinking about what he was about to do, what he was asking Eleanor to endure. Breaking an engagement the day of the wedding was not simply scandalous, it was catastrophic. Westbrook would be humiliated before all society. The wedding breakfast would have to be cancelled, guests turned away at the church door, explanations given that would satisfy no one. Eleanor's reputation would be damaged, perhaps irreparably, even though Alexander fully intended to marry her as quickly as possible. And yet, despite all of this, he felt something he had not experienced in years. Certainty. Not the cold certainty of duty performed, but the warm certainty of rightness, of having finally made a choice that aligned with his heart rather than his fears. "Your Grace?" A servant appeared in the doorway. "Lord Westbrook has arrived. He is asking for Miss Hartley." Alexander stood, his muscles stiff from sitting too long. "Where is Miss Hartley?" "In her sitting room, Your Grace. She asked that you both join her there." He followed the servant upstairs, his heart beating steadily. No more panic, no more doubt. What had to be done would be done, and they would face the consequences together. Eleanor's sitting room was small and feminine, decorated in shades of cream and rose, with morning light filtering through lace curtains. She stood by the window when Alexander entered, dressed in a simple morning gown of pale grey. Not her wedding dress. That choice alone spoke volumes. She turned when she heard him, and their eyes met. Something passed between them, understanding, support, love, before they both looked toward the door where Lord Westbrook was being shown in. Westbrook entered with the confident stride of a man anticipating his wedding day. He was dressed for the ceremony already, his formal attire impeccable, a small bouquet of flowers in his hand. He smiled when he saw Eleanor, then stopped short when he noticed Alexander standing beside her. "Greymont? What the devil are you doing here?" "Lord Westbrook." Alexander kept his voice steady. "Thank you for coming. We asked to speak with you." "We?" Westbrook's eyes moved between them, and Alexander saw the moment understanding began to dawn. The color drained from his face. No, surely not. "Eleanor, what is this?" Eleanor moved forward, her hands clasped before her. "Edward, I am so terribly sorry. I have treated you abominably, and you deserve so much better. But I cannot marry you today. I cannot marry you at all." "Cannot?" Westbrook's voice rose. "The wedding is in 3 hours. The church is prepared. The guests are coming. Our families. I know all of that. And I know this will cause you pain and embarrassment. and I would give anything to spare you that. But Edward, I do not love you. Not the way you deserve to be loved. Not the way a wife should love her husband. Love? Westbrook stared at her incredulously. What does love have to do with anything? We are well suited. Our families approve. We would have had a comfortable life together. Comfortable, Eleanor repeated softly. Yes, we would have been comfortable. But Edward, do you not want more than comfort? Do you not want passion, joy? A marriage based on genuine feeling rather than simple suitability? I want you, Westbrook's composure cracked. I have wanted you since the moment we met. I have courted you properly, honorably. I have done everything right, and now you are throwing it all away for... He turned his glare on Alexander. For him? For the Duke of bloody Greymont, who could not even be bothered to dance with you? He danced with Miss Charlotte Pemberton, Eleanor said quietly. For the first time in 14 years he danced, because watching me with you was intolerable to him, because he was beginning to feel again, and it frightened him. How touching. Westbrook's voice dripped with bitterness. And I suppose I am meant to step aside gracefully, to wish you both every happiness while I endure the humiliation of being jilted on my wedding day? No, Alexander said, speaking for the first time since Westbrook's arrival. You are not meant to be graceful about this at all. You have every right to be angry. With me, with Eleanor, with the situation. If you wish to call me out, to demand satisfaction, I will meet you. You would duel me. Is that supposed to make this better? No. Nothing will make this better for you, Westbrook. Nothing we can say will undo the wrong we are doing you. But I want you to understand that this was not a casual decision. Eleanor and I, we tried to stay apart. We tried to do what was right, what was proper. But sometimes what is right and what is proper are not the same thing as what is true. Westbrook laughed harshly. Philosophy from the Duke. How novel. He turned back to Eleanor. I thought you were different. I thought you were sincere, genuine. Not like the other girls who play games and break hearts for sport. But you are worse than any of them. Because you made me believe... His voice broke. You made me believe that we could be happy together. I am sorry, Eleanor whispered, tears streaming down her face. I am so sorry, Edward. You are a good man. You will make someone a wonderful husband. But that someone is not me, and pretending otherwise would be cruelty to both of us. So, instead, you are cruel now. Westbrook pulled himself together with visible effort. Very well. I will not stand in your way. I will not make a scene. I will inform the guests that the wedding has been cancelled due to circumstances beyond our control. I will endure the gossip and the speculation and the pity, and I will do it with dignity, which is more than either of you deserve. He moved toward the door, then stopped and looked back at Alexander. I hope she is worth it, Greymont. I hope loving her does not destroy you the way you have just destroyed me. The door closed behind him with careful control. Eleanor collapsed into a chair, sobbing. Alexander went to her immediately, kneeling beside her, pulling her into his arms. I hurt him, she gasped against his shoulder. I hurt him so badly. Yes, you did, we both did. He will hate me forever. Perhaps. But Eleanor, listen to me. He pulled back enough to see her face. What we did was necessary. Painful, but necessary. If you had married him while loving me, it would have hurt him more. Years of half-hearted affection, of knowing his wife thought of another man, of living with the ghost of what might have been, that would have been true cruelty. You cannot know that. I do know it, because I have lived. That half-life for 14 years. I have existed without really living, gone through motions without feeling them, and Eleanor, it is no life at all. You saved Westbrook from that. You saved us all from it. She clung to him, and they remained like that until her tears subsided. When she finally pulled away, she looked exhausted, but also, somehow, lighter. What happens now? She asked. Now we face the consequences. Together. The consequences began almost immediately. By afternoon, all of London knew that Miss Eleanor Hartley had jilted Lord Westbrook on their wedding day. By evening, everyone knew why. The Duke of Greymont had interfered. By the next morning, the scandal had reached proportions that even Alexander's title could not entirely shield them from. The gossip was vicious. Eleanor was called a jilt, a fortune hunter. a girl who had played two men against each other for maximum advantage. Alexander was called cold, calculating, a duke who had stolen another man's bride, simply because he could. Their love story, if one could call it that, was dissected in drawing rooms across London, with opinions divided sharply between those who found it romantic and those who found it reprehensible. Lady Ashford refused to receive Eleanor. 3 hostesses cancelled invitations they had extended to Alexander. Lord Pemberton, to his credit, remained a staunch defender, but even he admitted that public opinion was running strongly against them. "You need to marry her quickly," he advised during a visit to Grosvenor Square 3 days after the cancelled wedding. "The longer you wait, the worse the speculation becomes. People are saying you will abandon her now that you have won, that you never intended to marry her at all." "Then people are fools," Alexander said coldly. "I will marry her as soon as the bans can be read. 3 weeks. 3 weeks is too long. Get a special license. Marry her within the week. I will not have people say I rushed her into marriage to save her reputation. She deserves better than that. She deserves to not be torn apart by every gossip in London." Pemberton ran a hand through his hair in frustration. "For God's sake, Greymont, show some flexibility. Show the world that you love her enough to protect her from this vitriol." Alexander knew Pemberton was right, but pride, that old enemy, resisted. A special license felt like admitting they had done something wrong, like confirming the gossip that they had behaved inappropriately. He wanted their marriage to be correct, proper, beyond reproach. But when he called on Eleanor that afternoon, braving the disapproval of her mother, who still viewed him with deep suspicion, and saw the strain on her face, the shadows beneath her eyes, he realized that his pride was less important than her well-being. "Let me get a special license," he said without preamble. "Let me marry you this week and end this torture." Eleanor shook her head. "No, you wanted to court me properly. You wanted to prove to me and to everyone that this was real. Rushing into marriage now would undermine all of that. I care more about your happiness than about proving anything to society. But I care about proving it." She took his hand, her fingers threading through his. "I want the world to know that we chose each other not in a moment of passion or scandal, but deliberately, with full knowledge of what we were doing. Let them speculate for 3 weeks, Alexander. Let them say what they will. And then, when we marry in that church with all the traditional ceremony, it will mean something. It will be our declaration that we are not ashamed of our choice." He studied her face, seeing the determination there, the strength that had attracted him from the beginning. She was right, as usual. 3 weeks then, he agreed. "But Eleanor, I want you to know, I would marry you tomorrow if you asked. I would marry you today. I would marry you in secret or in public, with fanfare or in silence. When we marry matters far less to me than simply being able to call you my wife." She smiled, and it was like watching the sun break through clouds. "Then that is what I will be, in 3 weeks. Your wife, your Duchess, your love. You are already my love. The rest is simply formality." Those 3 weeks tested them both in ways neither had anticipated. Society's disapproval was one thing. They had expected that and could endure it. But more difficult was the quiet pressure from both their families. Eleanor's mother remained convinced that her daughter was making a terrible mistake. "He is too old, too set in his ways," she argued repeatedly. "He will make you miserable, Eleanor. Cold men do not suddenly become warm simply because they claim to love you." Alexander's own family, what little remained of it, was even worse. His aunt, the Dowager Duchess, wrote from Bath to express her horror at his behavior. "You have destroyed that poor Westbrook boy's life and made our family the subject of scandal. Whatever you think you feel for this girl, it is not worth the damage you have done to our name." But the worst came from an unexpected source. Thomas's former fiancée, Catherine Hartwick, who wrote to Alexander for the first time in 14 years. "Dear Alexander," the letter began, "I have read with great interest of your recent romantic entanglement. You must forgive my impertinence in writing, as we have had no contact these many years, but I feel compelled to share certain thoughts with you. When Thomas died, I believed my life had ended as well. I was 17 years old and convinced that I could never love again, that my heart had been buried with him. And for many years I lived in that grey half-life you describe feeling. I married Lord Hartwick because it was expected, because my parents insisted, because I saw no reason to refuse. But here is what I learned, Alexander. Grief does not honor the dead. Living does. Thomas would not have wanted either of us to spend our lives in mourning. He would have wanted us to love again, to find joy again, to embrace life rather than simply endure it. I do not know if Miss Hartley is the right woman for you. I do not know if your love will last or prove sufficient to overcome the obstacles before you. But I do know that choosing to feel, choosing to risk your heart despite the possibility of loss, that is the bravest thing you could do. That is how you honor Thomas's memory, by living the life he could not. I wish you every happiness, Alexander, and I hope you will extend my warmest congratulations to your bride. Yours, Catherine Hartwick. Alexander read the letter 3 times, then carried it to Eleanor and read it aloud to her. When he finished, they sat in silence for a long while. She is right, Eleanor said finally, about grief, about living. Yes, your brother would have liked me, I think. Thomas would have loved you. Alexander folded the letter carefully. He would have been delighted to see me so thoroughly undone by a woman half my size who refuses to be impressed by titles. Eleanor laughed, and the sound filled something in him that had been empty for too long. Tell me about him. About Thomas. You have spoken of his death, but never of his life. So Alexander did. For the first time since that terrible week 14 years ago, he spoke about his brother, about Thomas's laugh, his terrible singing voice, his ability to make friends wherever he went, about the pranks they had played as children, the arguments they had had as young men, the way Thomas had always known exactly what to say to make Alexander smile, even when he was determined to be serious. And Eleanor listened, her hand in his, occasionally asking questions, giving him the gift of an audience for memories he had kept locked away too long. "He sounds wonderful," she said, when Alexander finally fell silent. "He was. And I think I have been punishing myself for surviving him, for inheriting the title he should have had, for being alive when he was not. But Catherine is right. Thomas would not have wanted that. He would have told me I was being an idiot and that life was too short to waste on regret. Then perhaps we should take his advice. Perhaps we should." The 3 weeks passed and gradually the scandal began to fade. Society found new gossip to occupy itself with, newer scandals to discuss. Lord Westbrook, to his credit, behaved with dignity throughout, refusing to speak publicly about the broken engagement and eventually removing himself to his country estate for reasons of health. Alexander sent him a letter of apology that went unanswered and eventually accepted that some wounds took longer to heal than others. And finally, on a grey morning that threatened rain but never quite delivered it, Alexander Thornwood, 5th Duke of Greymont, stood at the altar of St. George's Church and watched Eleanor Hartley walk toward him. She wore ivory silk and her mother's pearls, and she was the most beautiful thing he had ever seen. Not because of the dress or the jewelry or the elaborate styling of her hair, but because of the way she looked at him, directly, openly, with love and trust, and just the slightest hint of mischief. The ceremony was shorter than originally planned. Many invited guests had declined to attend, maintaining their disapproval, but those who came were the ones who mattered. Pemberton and his wife, beaming proudly. Lady Ashford, who had eventually been won over by Eleanor's genuine distress at causing pain. A handful of Alexander's parliamentary colleagues, who valued character over conformity. And when the vicar asked if anyone present knew of any reason why the couple should not be wed, the silence that followed was absolute and perfect. "I do," Alexander said when prompted, his voice carrying clearly through the church. "I do," Eleanor repeated, her eyes never leaving his. "Then by the power vested in me, I pronounce, you husband and wife, you may kiss your bride, your grace." Alexander stepped forward and cupped Eleanor's face in his hands, thumbs brushing away the single tear that tracked down her cheek. "Hello, Duchess," he murmured. "Hello, Duke." He kissed her then, and it was nothing like their desperate embrace in the garden. This was tender, reverent, a promise sealed before God and witnesses. This was the beginning of something new, something terrifying, something worth every risk they had taken to arrive at this moment. When they finally broke apart, the small congregation applauded. Alexander took Eleanor's hand, and they walked down the aisle together, out of the church and into the grey London afternoon that suddenly seemed brighter than it had been moments before. A carriage waited to take them to their townhouse in Grosvenor Square. Alexander handed Eleanor inside, climbed in after her, and pulled the curtains closed against curious eyes. "What happens now?" Eleanor asked, echoing her question from weeks earlier. Alexander pulled her into his arms, holding her close enough to feel her heart beating against his chest. Now we live. We make mistakes. We argue and reconcile and learn how to be married. We scandalize society and make each other laugh. We visit Northumberland and fill that cold, empty house with warmth and eventually with children. We grow old together. We love each other. That sounds perfect. It will not always be perfect. I am still too proud. You are still too headstrong. We will drive each other mad at times. I am counting on it." She kissed him again, and this time there was heat beneath the tenderness. The Duke, who never cared about my dances, learned to feel again. I consider that a rather significant achievement. I never stopped feeling, Eleanor. I simply forgot how. You reminded me. Then we are even, because you reminded me what it means to be truly seen. The carriage rolled through London's streets, carrying them toward home and whatever future waited there. Alexander held his Duchess and felt his heart beat steadily, reliably, alive in a way it had not been for 14 years. He had been dead inside when she said those words at the Ashford ball. "This dance is not for you." But she had been wrong. Every dance, every moment, every heartbeat had been for her all along. He had simply needed to stop running from it long enough to notice. And now, finally, he had stopped running. Now he could stand still and love her openly and completely without fear. Now he could live.